Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's Writers Workshop. So our topic tonight is mastering historical fiction, and our author tonight is well versed in this genre. Please help me welcome back Jeanette Watts.
And let's have another round for Salim, who has been running these Writers Workshops. I've lived in a lot of towns with a lot of libraries, and a lot of them do not have a dynamic writers program like we do here. We are very lucky here in Champaign. All right, so now they put the camera on me. Hey, everybody. But my first thing is to talk to you guys that they won't be able to hear. Are all three of you writers? Are you writing in the mid-historic fiction? You've got characters that beating on your brain that you really need to get written out on paper. Where are you in your process?
I started a book some years ago by accident. It was a short story that just kind of grew.
That happens.
I've been taking a break from it, but it takes place in Germany, approximately 1629, 1630.
Fun.
And I did a lot of, it's kind of that thing of how you do some research without falling into it. And
We'll talk a lot about that.
I'm not fluent in German, and so, if it was in England, it would be a lot easier to find information. So I'm kind of doing a combination of looking at what I have and kind of bluffing, and I think it's been mostly okay. It's a fantasy, so that gives you a little bit of leeway.
It does.
Something isn't totally accurate.
That's right. How about you?
It's just something that's been on my bucket list that I've always wanted to do. Historical fiction is so interesting, but there's some technical details.
Yeah, we will talk a lot about that. How about you? You shook your head.
No, I'm not writing anything. I thought I'd drop in, and maybe I will write something after this.
Absolutely. First thing I'm going to do is a lot of this lecture is about scaring people. I don't mean to, but there's a lot about it. So, what's the point of historical fiction? I mean, historical fiction is taking interesting bits from the past and using them to tell universal stories about the human condition. So, but why bother with historical fiction? You could just write a story that doesn't require so much research. It's one of the things, some of the characteristics, since I asked for the white marker board, I could bring this over. And the screen gets to see this too. So one of the first things that makes it historical fiction is you need an immersive historical setting. I mean, why is it interesting? It's because history is fun. My first my first love of historical fiction is because I found Gone with the Wind at my mom's girlfriend's house when I was in 6th, 7th grade. And I was hooked. There was so much detail, and Margaret Mitchell was first and foremost a journalist. So this was a woman who understood looking things up and getting your details right, and you need more details. And so the depth to the story, you're not going to get as much out of trying to set that today. I mean, now, of course, we'd call it a thriller, right? So, but people are curious about the past. I mean, why are you reading historic fiction? You're curious about the past. And for me, it's not just, having the details out of the newspaper, but you really got to get down and dirty in there. What did it sound like? What did it smell like? What did it taste like? People want to know that. And so you have to be able to answer those questions. We'll talk about how do you get there. We'll talk about that later. Next thing that makes it that part of historical fictions is that, and this is the tricky part, is you have to have relatable characters. And this one, so there's this, clumsy trope that you see coming out of Hollywood over and over and over and over and over and over, and all the historical fashion people on TikTok and all that gag over every single one of them. It's the plucky heroine who doesn't like wearing her corset. It's everywhere. It's all the time, and it's so ghastly. I mean, the corset thing, it's underwear. It's your underwear. in a world where you've never had anything but a corset. I mean, they were called stays, they were called bodies. They've been around since the 1500s.
You're gonna wear it anyway, yeah.
You're wearing it. It's your underwear. I mean, before that, in the Middle Ages, you'd have these tight dresses that just kind of like pushed your bows against yourself because it was just the dress was. So the plucky heroine, the best I can get is that Hollywood is trying to make it relatable. And everyone goes, oh, I just don't understand how women could possibly wear those corsets. Oh, that's how we'll make the plucky heroine relatable. And it's like, gack, don't do that. Just don't do that one. But it's, the thing with the relatable characters, besides the badly done ones, is there's a comfort in the tropes. You know, we've got friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, second chance romance, all of which I just described 3 Jane Austen novels, boom, 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 which is not historical fiction, but it kind of is to us now. But anyway, so I'm checking my notes. Where was I? Because I always go off book, and it was like I had a point. Where was it? Okay, I'd already made it. All right, but we're going to come back to that you know, women's clothing history. We're going to put a pin in that. We'll come back to that later. Next thing, drama and high stakes. Which is, you could say, isn't that like all stuff? I mean, if you're watching if you're reading the Game of Thrones books and there's like, you know, you're running from the dragons, it's always drama and high stakes, right? But now, name your favorite historical fiction that you've read. I'll start with Gone with the Wind, because I brought that one up.
Well, it's not Gone with the Wind.
But what's your name some historical fiction?
I think it would be The Longest Memory.
Longest Memory. I'm changing colors just because Solomon gave me all these colors of marker, so I got to use them.
Answer why the Jane Austen is not.
Because she wrote it in 1818, and she's talking about 1818.
Okay.
So, you know, for us, you know, looking back at it, it's cute and historical fiction to us, but it wasn't at the time. Anybody else? What else is historical fiction that you like?
I mean, a lot of the westerns, I don't read westerns, but I would.
Yep, we'll talk about the number of kinds, but yeah, all the Zane Grey westerns, I believe, were like he wasn't a contemporary. So, well, if anybody likes historical fiction, my Brains and Beauty and Wealth and Privilege are set in Pittsburgh during the Industrial Revolution.
Now,
So,
let me ask you real quick. So The Little House on the Prairie is not historical fiction because the lady who wrote it.
I mean, that.
same exact thing. That one's kind of crazy.
She wrote it when she
Later
was
in life.
older about her childhood.
It's
So
still a memoir, though.
It's like 60, there's like a 60-year difference.
Yeah, it's
Like
kind of,
I think, sorry. But
yeah,
like,
it is a memoir,
You
so.
might, because she was around at the time, you know,
Yeah.
that's different.
I'm really glad you brought that up, though, because would you believe it? It's in my notes. As like I did things. I put Little House on the Prairie books and went,
Oh, okay. I didn't see your notes.
yep, exactly. But I love the fact that we're on the same page because I also love the Little House books, and you know,
Tom Sawyer fall into that category?
no, because that was also, you know, he was writing about his times. Yeah, he's just writing about his lifetime.
But
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting at an interesting like terminology question, which is
Mm-hmm.
like, is there a time period? Like, is it like if I'm writing it within 40 years, you know, or 30
Yeah.
years, does
Does
it
it still
as
count?
historical if I was alive?
Yeah,
at the
you know,
time?
A Women's Persuasion is set in 2007. Is that historical?
Yeah.
Oliver Twist?
Oliver Twist. Charles Dickens was also writing about his times, so that's all right. But you know, one of the things that historical fiction does have in common, no matter, let's say you're writing something set in the Roman era, or if you're writing it, there's a historical fiction set in World War II, World War I. I mean, there's plenty of it out there. But one thing that I think all of it has in common, it's a story about a bunch of people who are running for their lives through history. So all of it, you get the plot for all of them is sort of a struggle for survival. It's pretty primal, but it's sort of true of absolutely all of them. Gone with the Wind. We'll go back to that one because that one is historical fiction. She wrote it in 1939, and she's talking about 1860s. But you know, what is she doing? She's running through her life, through all the events of history that are going on, and just trying to tread water and keep your head above water. So next thing that makes it historical fiction, we're going to change colors again because we can.
Ever the Bible itself.
What's that?
Ever the Bible itself. I don't consider that to be fiction.
That one is in the eye of the beholder. We'll go with that. But next one, historically accurate content. And that's, that one, all of these things are, we'll talk more about this later, but it's one of the things you need to make it historical fiction is that, why do people read historical fiction? You kind of need to understand that if you're going to write it. Who's your audience? What are their expectations? And what are your expectations that you want your readers to come away with? That is like really important. Why are you writing historical fiction instead of writing about today? So Jane Austen Lied to Me is set any college campus in America, and it's only starting to get a little dated when I you talk about things like the computers or phones or all that. These things change so often. It's going to get dated naturally, just like Jane Austen. It'll organically get older as I wrote it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago. It will become dated, but it's not. That was not the intention when I wrote it. I wrote it for the year that it was published. So. But we'll come back to, a lot of these we'll circle back to. We'll keep the red for just a moment. And this is the weirdest one. Accessible, I think I just spelled that wrong, but elevated prose. This is the weirdest part. How do you have your characters speaking in the past? You have to stay, and part of it's just staying believable. If you're setting a story, if you write a story that's set in ancient Egypt, like there was a Agatha Christie mystery. She usually is writing in the 1920s, in the 20s, about the 20s, but she has one that my favorite one was set in ancient Egypt, but it's not like she wrote it in Egyptian. She didn't write it in the hieroglyphs, because we have to be able to read it. She's writing for a modern audience. But if you're using modern slang, you are going to catapult your audience out of your story. It's got to feel right. There's got to be, you've got to get in the ballpark. This is an old example, but there was and this is Hollywood movie something, not a book, but it was set in Gettysburg during the Civil War. And there was an argument between two characters, and this guy says, "Okay, fine, you demand," which is, yeah. That is as bad as if they would have been saying, "Whoa, far out, groovy." It's every bit as bad, even though it was 1980s slang in 1980. That's still not cool. That is so sloppy. I mean, the way you just started laughing, it's like, is that really how you want your audience to react? To go, "Oh, facepalm, oh my God."
Unless you're trying to write like a satire.
Yeah, if you're writing a satire, great. But not if you want your readers to take you seriously, you kind of need to take the subject and the time period seriously. So we get to start all over. Woo.
Almost making things up. Got a book that was written in that time.
Yeah.
And you read how that person was writing, and if they're saying or near,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to. So when I was writing My Dearest Miss Fairfax, I had to go through. It's set in. For me, it is about it's Jane Austen's Emma rewritten from the point of view of one of the other characters, and I had to go through. I mean, first I had to make sure that all of the timeline and everything that is said is correct. But one of the last things I had to do was go through contractions. It's not that there are no contractions in Jane Austen. She does have them. I had to comb the books to see which ones she uses and take out all the ones that I use that she never does. So thank goodness for things like Universal Search and Replace and the Project Gutenberg. You can get Emma on Project Gutenberg, and I could search, it was searchable. So I could find all the contractions and leave them in or put them in to make it sound more naturally like 1817 by getting the language right. And so that's like, is that one level of geekiness more than needed? I don't think so. Not if you want it to feel and sound right. People aren't even going to like get how it's right, how it's wrong. And oh, they never use contractions. Well, that's not correct either. So, but having it as close as I can to what I am trying to write like, certainly better than the Georgette Heyer stuff that I read in one of my past lectures that was like, a man of good fortune, a respectable man of good fortune. And she made it sound like stupid. All right, you mentioned fantasy. There are several different kinds of historical fiction. These aren't solid genres. You could set something in any time period. But we do get, number one, historical fantasy. So if you're going to have, it's going to be set in Germany in the 1600s, but there's magic. I mean, I want to say Lady Hawk. It was a movie that I have the book from it. It's set in France in like the 1400s, but oh, by the way, there's a magic curse and blah blah blah. So, but it was otherwise set in a real setting, in a real place, in a real time, with there might have been like cameos by real people, which of course is always like, that's part of the fun. If you're going to set it in time and place in history, it's because you get to talk about people. I've got Andrew Carnegie walking through my books and so on.
Wonderful Lesson Before Dying would be in that category.
That could be. Unfortunately, there's a lot I haven't read. The next one, and this is where it's like, where does Bridgerton fall in between the two of these? Alternate history. What if Queen Charlotte was black? Which is actually not in the Bridgerton books. That was all rewrite to make the show as popular as it is because it's very, inclusive. But it is a rewrite from the original books. But the alternative histories, the what ifs. What if somebody assassinated Hitler? What if the South had won the Civil War? All the kinds of different what ifs that you could possibly do, and pick your era. What if Christopher Columbus hadn't come to America? I mean, there are just any point in history making a what if. That's what the alternate histories are. Historical mysteries. So we were just talking about Agatha Christie. My favorite Agatha Christie mystery is a historical mystery. It's set in ancient Egypt, not on the Nile or the Orient Express in the 1920s.
Which one is it?
I don't remember the name of it, sadly.
Appointment with Death. The Appointment with Death.
I'll take your word for it.
I'm just.
Yeah, I don't remember. It was just, there was a sweetness about
I
it.
know what it was. It was the one where, because I've watched the whole series show, so they did.
Uh-huh.
So it was the one where this guy died while he was looking for, I think, King Tut's tomb.
Okay, yeah, that sounds like one of the,
You know, when your teeth.
oh my
shine
gosh.
and you can't-
Yeah, now those, that sounds like more like that was contemporary 1920s. If Agatha Christie wrote that in the 20s, that
Okay,
makes
you're
it
right,
not,
so it wouldn't
yeah,
be
that would
right.
not make it historical fiction then. But the one she said in ancient Egypt, it was a girl, her husband died, she went home to her family, and there was murders, like one of her brothers, it turned out to be the murderer at the end, but there again, it's Agatha Christie, there was a whole lot of murder and mayhem, but it was, yeah. Maybe? Yeah, I read it when I was 16 years old, but I still remember that. But I'm 57, so it's been a lot of years since I read it. But I'm going to look it up. Okay, so one of my favorite of the historical mysteries that has been turned into TV shows, we keep coming to TV instead of writing, Miss Fisher's Murder Mysteries. It is an Australian writer who has a series of these, but Miss Fisher's is being written now about the 1920s. So, historical thriller, another subgenre. I can't think of any titles off the top of my head, but it's, more, you're running from your life from the gangsters more than, so The Untouchables, a lot of the sort of, again, we keep using Hollywood. We got to stop doing that. Can you tell I have a master's degree in cinema? So another subgenre on its own is we're going to make nautical fiction. So and it doesn't have to be about pirates. Not that my playing Grace O'Malley I played Grace O'Malley the Pirate Queen for the Renaissance Festival a very long time ago, and it kind of like it spoils you for the rest of your life.
Pirates of Penzance.
But Pirates of Penzance was the pirate sort of. But there are all kinds of adventure stories set at sea. So the nautical stuff gets its own things. All right, you brought up Westerns. Westerns is its own category that we really don't need to explain. We've all heard of Zane Grey. We all know that Westerns in the American West and the romanticization of it all, it's a thing. So, and then historical fiction biographies. So I'm going to put biography, but I'm talking the historical fiction ones. So I was about to start writing. I'd been researching and writing and just starting the writing on one about J.P. Morgan's librarian. Her name was Belle DaCosta Green. She was the world's foremost expert just by working with J. Pierpont Morgan. She became the world's foremost expert on like antique manuscripts. She can identify a fake from 20 paces. And she was this like gorgeous petite woman, like 18 when JP hired her and all that. So it's kind of an unconventional romance, if you will. But she was also passing. Her father was a famous black congressman. But she and her brother were much lighter skinned. And when anybody said she was a little bit dusky, and she said, oh, my grandmother was Portuguese. And everybody, oh, okay. But as I was like writing to Italy to get some of the letters, and I go, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. It was COVID. So, and the next thing you know, somebody else published the book that I was wanting to write. It was like, ugh. So I haven't gone back to do it because it's a very intriguing story. And I haven't read the one somebody else wrote. So, as somebody pointed out, that doesn't mean they got it right. True. I just, somebody else had the same idea I did. How dare they?
Your transcription.
There you go. So here's the various angles on what kind of historical fiction you might want to do. There's a big question that somebody brought up over here about how much research and how much do you make up? We'll call it accuracy versus creative license. This is all a matter of taste, and opinion. How accurate do you need to be? I mean, there's a lot of bad historical fiction out there. Now, to me, when I say bad, and I mean really bad, I'm calling it bad because the writer couldn't bother to do their homework. And to me, that means that they don't care about their readers. If you're not thinking about your readers, what are you writing for? Is this just, why write historical fiction if you don't want to do the homework? That's the fun of it. Those of us who love falling down a rabbit hole because it was a newspaper printed in 1845 and it's got stuff, there's poems in there about sleigh riding next to the stuff that you were trying to find in the first place about the building of a building. And I mean, that's how you get that's where you're getting your dense and perfect text from. That's how you're telling people, what did it smell like? What did it taste like? What did it sound like? That's where you find that. And if you don't like the research, you don't have to write it. But keeping in mind your readers, remember that thing about who's reading this. Think about who those people are. Who is your audience and what do they want from you? That's the question. Who is your, I should write that down. Who is your audience? You have to be inside their head if you're writing for them. So what do they want from you? Why did they pick historical fiction? Figure they want to be entertained, transported, and immersed, and educated. They want to learn something from this. And if what they learn from you is that Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg was black, not German,
Well, she was both, and that's what I wanted to.
Spanish. Yeah, there's a Spanish great-great-great-grandfather. So, but it's, you know, it's, oh, Moorish. Okay,
So she was black.
right.
And that brings to my.
It's that 2 drops.
Well, it brings, but you know, they say one drop and you're black, so. But-
It's very generous of you to claim it.
Well, I'm just saying, that's
Uh-huh.
what we always said.
Right.
The thing is that my question is, how can you expect historical fiction to have such accuracy when history itself isn't really accurate? You know, they don't tell us that Queen Charlotte was black, but if you go to Wikipedia, you'll see her brothers and sisters, pictures of them. It's clear they're black.
So, yeah, so you know, you have to, and that's it. You did the primary source research. And then you can tell the story once you have the primary source materials, you know. So,
If history isn't accurate, then how?
Well, I think what she's saying is you can't just learn like whatever history you learn
Yeah.
in school, like you have to do that.
yeah, history isn't accurate means you were looking at a bad historical source, you know. And that's one of the things is, and we'll talk more about that later, is you got to go to the right sources. So, you know, everything, when you keep in mind that when you write, your readers are going to assume that everything you say is true. I've had to, you know, it's very, since we already talked about that, next thing you know. You also need to keep in mind, also part of the why did they pick historical fiction? You probably have an educated audience. So people were going to know when you just make things up. And they're not going to be impressed when you get dates wrong. So there was an expression that we're going back to that master's degree in cinema television while working in Hollywood. They say, like we were talking, remember the ancient Egyptian thing? Let's say you get something wrong. It's like, so we lose all of the Egyptologists in the room. All right. But let's say, like, you set your book in 1920s Hollywood in the movie industry. But then the judge turned out to have a master's degree in cinema television. And I'm reading a book set in the 1920s in Hollywood. Why did I pick that book out of the 40 books? Pick one and judge and fill your category. It was, I'm reading through this is a book about this is a book about, I want the one set in Hollywood in the 1920s. So out of 40 books, I picked the one I was going to judge because I was excited about the topic, which was a topic I knew something about. If I didn't know about it, I wouldn't have been as excited. And then I read it. So when they start getting things wrong, like the dates of the Fatty Arbuckle murder trial, that's cringy. And then they start referring to the long career of a character actor whose first movie is 4 years after the Fatty Arbuckle murder trial. You've just lost me.
It's like, it's not that hard to work that stuff out.
Right. You got to do your homework. And you got to do your homework. And you've got to do your homework. And when you get your homework wrong, how many people have you lost? They've been catapulted out of the story just as badly as saying Yuda Man or Groovy or Far Out in the middle of a book about the Civil War. You know, you got to have some respect for your readers. Assume that maybe they know, in fact, they might know more than you do. That's why you got to do your homework. So, yeah, I hate to say it, but don't screw up. You got to keep doing it. How do you not screw up? We get to write the next sentence. And let's see, are there any colors I haven't used yet on this? Let's just go back there. There we go. Now I can't push it back anymore. There is a way to not lose your audience's respect. It's 3 very simple words. And it's all the same word. Research, research, research. If you don't love the research, why are you writing historical fiction? Or only write stories set in very remote times when we have very little information and and there's more room for license. But make sure you know that when you're taking creative license, it isn't that you just didn't do enough homework. If you're going to write about the Vikings, they know a lot about a lot of things about the Vikings. So don't go making things up. On the other hand, as a dance historian, we know nothing about how the Vikings danced. There's just nothing. And I can badger every historical researcher on Vikings, and they say, we got nothing. We cannot prove. Did only men dance? Did only women dance? Did they dance together? Did they dance? There was a lot of old dances that were done in lines and chains, and you kind of held hands and snaked around. Is that how the Vikings danced? We can't prove it. There's nothing. So if you were to say that we know that they pretty sure they danced, we don't know how. So I would have creative license if I were writing a story and I wanted them dancing. If I took a liberty on my best guess of what was going on elsewhere in the world around the time, at least there's nobody going to say, oh, honey. Now, they might say, yeah, we don't know how they danced, so that it would still be a little iffy, but at least you're not.
I mean, you're basing it on something and not just saying they're doing the bunny hop.
Yes, you're basing it on something. So, another important thing about what you were just saying, we're just going to put it right in between in a different color because, again, you got to have fun. Primary source materials. This is so important. If you are going to bother to tell stories set in the past, what do you know about that time? What do we know about the time? Just reading a book that was written by somebody who did a book report on stuff that they had done, that's not a good place to start. Well, it's a place to start, just don't stop there. What were their source materials? Go to the primary source materials. When you're holding the newspaper printed in 1845, talking about the fact that it was raining on September 14th, 1845, you could write about it raining, and who's going to say you nay on that one? You could point to the newspaper and prove this. If I'm using 1845, the polka craze of 1844, I get to use that one because it's a thing. You cannot find anything, the word polka, in newspapers in 1843 or 42. But 1844, the polka is this hot new dance. It crosses Europe. It jumps the pond. It crosses the United States. You ever hear of President Polk? There are those who think that part of why he got elected was the name recognition. I mean, we know how people vote for very strange reasons. So, but the primary source material, it's like you look up polka in 1845 or 1844, and there is sheet music, the polka music for sale, polka boots, polka dots. You've heard of the fabric, right? It's all over everything in the newspapers, in your primary source material. So if you want to talk about what did it smell like, taste like, sound like, it's a polka in 1845. You've got something to hang it on, and it's something that nobody can argue with you about because you're looking at the primary source material. And it also circumvents all of those, somebody did a rewrite or rewrote the rewrite. You can't do that when you're looking at the primary source material. You just, when you get people have questions, you show them the painting. Who's going to argue with the painting? You need the primary source material. And of course, it does help if you have a painting that is not the copy of a copy of a copy, because that happens. So, but you stick with your primary source material. But, okay, another thing, research. Research is more than just reading. We'll go back to the polka thing since it's like, all right, if you know because you've been reading that the polka was the hot thing and it's all over, have you ever danced the polka? If you hadn't danced it, what does it feel like? How long can you polka for? Are you out of breath after 2 minutes? Can you go for an hour? If it's 1914 and you're writing 1914 and you did a tango, what does that feel like? How is it different? You have to get in the dirt and find out what it feels like, smells like, tastes like. Have you eaten the food from that area? We can get recipes from lots of different eras. I don't know much about that fish sauce recipe from the ancient Romans, but I'll bet you somebody out there has a recipe for that fermented fish sauce that the Romans were eating. I mean, big business in Pompeii, right? But if you've eaten the foods from your time period, have you cooked the foods from that time period? Can you describe that smokiness you get from the fill in the blank? Is it because of the cooking technique from when you have to take the iron pot and you put it in the coals and then you shovel coals on top of the iron pot in order to bake the biscuits? Can you tell I work with living history people? All those experiences that you can bring to the table are going to enrich your writing. It's how you find out what it smells like, tastes like, sounds like. You have to just get in there and do it. So now that we've got the research part of that down, you've done the research, you've written your story. The next thing you get to do is, again, 3 magic little words. Edit. And once again, it's the same 3 words. One of the things that happens a lot, especially with self-publishing, is people get, it's not proprietary. Your ego gets bound up in your stories and in everything, but you don't let somebody else give it a look. Or just have a friend look at it and say, oh, honey, you're such a good writer. You want somebody with a red pen and a machete because it's your name on the cover. You're the one that's going to embarrass yourself when somebody goes, oh, honey, you know that the Fatty Arbuckle trial was 4 years earlier than that, right? You're the one who's embarrassing yourself. You need the people who are going to get all those things right. So, but another thing that happens involved with ego is that you show off your homework. You did the research. You're showing off all the research you did. But remember that the story comes first. The characters come first. The research is the world building. It's not the story. So you do have to make sure that the characters and the story are what's shining through. People are not going to be laying awake at night worrying about your characters while they're running through their lives through history if they're bored out of their mind because they're still reading your homework. It's got to be seamless. You've got to have it, the stakes. Remember that thing, drama and stakes came up quite a while ago? About half an hour ago? That has to come first, and they have to be tied together. But all the rules for writing a good story in any genre are still going to have to apply. Show, don't tell. You can show them in ways that are also using your homework, but it's showing the character and showing off your homework. It doesn't have to be, here's all my homework, and now here's the character. Mush them all together so that you can't pull them apart. Like, cookie dough. Once you put all the ingredients and mush them all together, you're not going to pull the flour and the baking soda out when you were supposed to use baking powder, not baking soda. You really want them organically pushed together. But the thing that you get with history is think of it as this extra fun toolkit that you get to use to flesh out the characters. So, oh good, I've left plenty of time at the end for questions and answers, but okay. Oh yes, and editing, I believe in a lot of eyes. When you're editing, people will just go to an editor, but I think that no matter what, nobody knows everything. So once you get what you want massaged into shape, get a lot of eyes on it. A professional editor is great. You really need that. but make sure that they know everything about everything that you know that you've got in there. It was one of my beta readers that happened to work in the automobile industry. If you have a BMW, what's the nickname for a BMW? Beamer? How do you spell that? Americans are all going to say B-E-A-M-E-R. It's a German car.
That would be B-I-M-E-R, right?
Right. It's a German car. It's B-I-M-M-E-R. So if you don't have somebody who happens to work for the auto industry to have proofread your book to say, oh honey, you just lost all the car lovers in your audience. Oops.
Wow.
Yeah. So you need to, that thing about be afraid of your readers. They're smarter than you, they know more than you, and you wanted them to read your book. If you can keep that level of respect at all times, you might make sure that all those mistakes get, you want to clear those things up. So my final conclusion for this, let's see, are you able to see the board over there? I just realized that my thing is over there. So think of your story. We're going to do this. Let's see, right here. I told Salim about this. Okay. My artist skills kind of qualify me for first grade. Think of your story as a hamburger. So what's the plot of the story? Boy meets girl. Okay. All beef patty, as opposed to Incrediburger or the kind that your mom, like with the stretchers in it, like putting in the breadcrumbs and everything. It was more like meatloaf than it was like that.
Is that your way of saying it's a basic?
Yeah, so this is where you're starting. You start with your patty on your hamburger. That's your story. Now, you pick the years that your story is going to take place in. So that's going to be your top bun. Oh, we're going to do that a little differently. Whoop! Okay, that was, at least I caught it. I caught it on my cast. Hey, that's not bad. Okay, so we need to leave room for this. So here's our bun. So that's the year that when your story takes place. Okay, so the year your story starts and the year it ends. So in Wealth and Privilege, it starts in 1875 and it ends in 1889. Pick your location. That's the sesame seeds on the bun. Wealth and Privilege, set in Pittsburgh during the Industrial Revolution. Gone with the Wind, set in the Civil War in Atlanta, Georgia. So that's your sesame seeds on your bun. So now, all the details are what makes the difference between, let's see, what do we have here? Let's say we have I've already used brown. Go for the blue. We're going to have this is the Swiss cheese with for a mushroom Swiss burger. How's this for mushrooms? All right, there we go. So we have a mushroom Swiss burger with onions, grilled onions, all right? So that's burger one, and there's your story set in the Roman Empire with the weird fish sauce. Or, by contrast, you would get a very different burger if we just do a very classic tomatoes and, whoops, this is lettuce. Yes, you saw me pick the green. It's like the lettuce is, I had the lettuce. And then, let's see, we haven't used the blue yet. So then we'll have onion rings on this one. Or just, the raw onion. That's onion rings, but raw onion. And let's see, I need more colors already. Oh my God. Here's the ketchup. My husband always put on a lot of ketchup. And I haven't used what? I haven't used the black yet. We need mustard. Okay, black mustard. It's Dijon mustard. Okay, work with me here. So, but you see, we're getting a very different burger here than we did out of the mushroom Swiss burger. And now you've got a story set in Pittsburgh during the Industrial Revolution. So it's all flavoring, but it's all, they're all ingredients. But make sure you have, like The difference between a fresh burger where like when you're at home and it's you just slice the onion and the lettuce is from your garden, and one of those nasty ones where the lettuce is all kind of wilted and all that kind of stuff. That's the difference between good research and bad research. And if you didn't do your research at all, what you're going to get is the thing that this is like, not that this is autobiographical. You're right. And so I was just on my way from A to B. I've been doing a lot of traveling in the last month, and I stopped at a truck stop. And there's like, I'm starving, and I've been looking for a place for 20 miles, 30 miles, and it's just like, stop at this truck stop and get a thing. So I got a foil wrapped burger. Great. Get back on the road. And it was like a slice of overcooked meatloaf in between 2 stale patties and nothing else. So,
You were sad.
yeah, it did not make me happy. It did not make my drive better. Did I choke it down because I was starving? And they usually say that's, hunger is the best seasoning. That was not enough for that burger. Yeah. So if you think about what are you doing with your story? Every single, you want the Whopper with cheese with everything on it, not the, not the dried meatloaf between 2 stale pieces of bread. It's really, really, it's not that it's important to, it should be important to you. That's why you wanted to write historical fiction. But remember, it's going to be very important to your readers. Keep afraid of them. Keep doing your homework. Ask questions. Ask directions. Do not be shy about asking for feedback. When I did my Dearest Miss Fairfax, I am no musician. And so I managed to get lucky, and a very well-known music historian from Cambridge, the music library. The music librarian was a Jane Austen fan. So it's like, hey, got a question for you. Could you read my passages for me and tell me everything I did wrong? It's how you don't embarrass yourself. And there's something very, when I'm not going to lose all of the musicians in the audience, I did my homework. So, all right. We've got 10 minutes now for questions. Anybody have comments, questions, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Talk to me.
Okay, so we know that TV and cinema has a lot of bad stuff.
Does a lot of bad stuff and takes a lot of
So why
license.
should they still like it? So why do books get scrutinized like that
Why?
versus when TV is never
Well, okay.
movies rather?
Yeah, no, it is like movies tend to they tend to be lazy. It's like let's just play to the lowest common denominator. Why have higher standards than that? We don't have to. But if you did, you think people don't notice the difference? Then look at the first season of, and this is fantasy, not even historical fantasy, first season of Game of Thrones, and the first several seasons of Game of Thrones, and the last season. Oh yeah, like everybody who loved the show was horrified and disgusted because the last season is like, we don't need any dialogue. We'll just have a lot of dragon traces and explosions and people will be happy. Nobody was happy. It was the lack of standards, the lack of dialogue, the lack of, they just thought they could get away with it. And it didn't hold up. And people aren't as stupid as producers want them to think. They don't pay it because they're in power and they don't need to care as much. But as a writer, if you're not a powerful writer already, how are you getting there? Well, there's other ways. Writing historical fiction is one of the hardest genres to sell. Yes, if you write historical fiction, just be famous first and then write a book. It is very difficult to get there. There's not that it isn't being read a lot, but
There's a lot of it already out there, right? Is it just saturated?
well, it's not the saturation because you can write fantasy and there is just a limitless appetite for it. There's not as much appetite, and you also have if you're world building, you just have to be internally consistent. You know, if it's Game of Thrones, you just have to do dragons fly, do mermaids swim. I mean, whatever. That's a bad example. But you just have to be internally consistent. If you're in history, you have to be historically consistent and accurate. If you're doing alternative history, well, now you've got some leeway. What if so-and-so did such and such and it changed how history happened? So yeah, it isn't fair that there's a different standard, but there is. And there, to my way of thinking, there should be. The consumers of books and the consumers of social media, the consumers of Hollywood products, they're not the same consumers. So if you wanted to write a book, you're writing for readers. If you wanted to write a screenplay, you're writing for viewers. So it is very much a different standard. So thank you. That is an excellent question. Anything else? I know I've scared everybody, but this was, as I wrote this, it's like, oh, it's because of the standards. It is just like you said. So, and of course, you think that they don't get called on Hollywood doesn't get called on things. Yeah. So is anybody, on HBO, there's a show called The Gilded Age. And it's sort of a historical mishmash of 3 generations of the Vanderbilt family. And being very well versed in that era, I've spent a lot of time in Newport, Rhode Island, and I've been to all their homes, and I've researched a lot of the characters, and I've read all their biographies, and I've danced in Mrs. Astor's ballroom, so I can tell you what it's like to dance in Mrs. Astor's ballroom. And when they did this mishmash, there are things, it's like, they got that from that. Oh, that's from that's cute. Okay, they mushed it together. And then there's the dresses that up the back, there's this seam, this bumpy thing, and it's just like, oh, honey. And then you put zippers up the back of the dresses. And I was a troll, and I put something on there. It's like, yeah, I wish they wouldn't have put the zipper up the back of theirs. Those aren't zippers, they're hooks and eyes. If you've ever seen a dress from 1887 or whatever years they're trying to do, those dresses all close in the front. There would be hooks and eyes on the back. So did you do your homework or not?
Well, that was helpful for them.
Yeah, So, but somebody had to hand sew all those hooks and eyes in. There's a lot fewer hooks and eyes on the front of one of those dresses than on the back. They would have saved themselves trouble if they would have, not put the thing down. And what did it look like to me? It looks like a zipper. Good job. Make it look like it's wrong when it's less wrong than you thought, but it looks wrong. Good job. So, it's no matter how much research you do, there are those trolls out there who the reason they wanted to even see you or read you is because they know about the topic. So, yeah, be very frightened of your audience in historic fiction because they're probably drawn to it exactly because they love it already. I've talked to a lot of readers who are, I don't do World War II, but I've talked to a lot of World War II readers, and that's the first thing they say. Oh, I love I can't read. You write historic fiction? Do you do anything in World War II? I love World War II. I never pass up historic fiction from World War II because there's such a big theater. There's so many stories to tell in so many different places. So, but I don't think I could. They'd have to pay me a lot of money before I'd even attempt that because I'm way too terrified because those readers know it very well. So, yeah.
Is there a difference between writing a children's historical fiction and?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, think about think they are, but yeah, kids won't forgive you for lying to them. You get your facts wrong, they have lied. I am still mad at Laura Ingalls Wilder. I read her biography and I found out all the stuff she lied about and Actually, it's not her, it's her daughter Rose Wilder Lane, who was her editor. But there's stuff in Laura Ingalls Wilder stuff that isn't true. They smush things around. It's like, and why couldn't she just tell me the truth? Just because I'm in 3rd grade and 6th grade and I've adored Laura Ingalls Wilder. But I love her, but I'm not pleased with her. Now that I read her biography, I'm a little ticked at her. But you've got to, children, of course, what you can tell them is different. But with children, you'll notice just from working with them, what they want more than anything else is honesty.
And they write stories about animals that talk, and you're saying children want honesty?
Well, that's
Well,
not fantasy, they know. that-
Yeah, animals that talk is not historical fiction.
No, I'm just saying, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what you're saying, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I just would think that if children read those type of books, then they wouldn't be as hard on people who write historical fiction. So,
But it's the thing about historical fiction. If you want to do it, just think, you are being held to a higher standard than any other kind of writing. You know?
Is it possible I can get, because I didn't get the memo about this class until last week as part of the handout for another class I'm taking.
Oh my gosh,
But,
that's a solemn question.
but there was apparently this is the second class out of that, because there's another class before, like, what, last week or a couple weeks ago?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just had another one that was how to write an autobiography. That one? Autobiography.
Yeah.
If you missed one, it's on our YouTube page. So all
Okay.
these are recorded. And
Yep.
you can find them on
The reason there's this lovely camera here is so that you can always go back and catch what you missed.
my questions and
Yes.
answers are gonna be on YouTube.
Well, actually the recordings are really kind of funny. Like there was like last, I looked at one of my other ones because I wanted to see about using the marker board and so forth. And it's like, it's really hard to hear except me. So like all the questions from that class, you couldn't hear the questions, just my answers. So, yep. But you had good questions. So if you were heard, you realized somebody wanted to know the exact same thing.
Yes. That's fine.
All right, Solomon is lurking. We are exactly at 8 o'clock. Any last questions before we say goodnight? Well, thank you so much for spending a lovely hour talking about historical fiction with me. And if anybody's interested, I do have copies of my novels up here. And for the viewing audience, just look up Jeanette Watts, and on Amazon you will find all of my books.
Thank you.
Come join us next week.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. A big thank you to Jeanette, as always. Really great advice and great content delivered in the most fun way possible. So thank you.
Well, I scare everybody.
Just a reminder, we'll be back down here Wednesday, July 3rd. That's going to be a writer's lounge. So our lounges are a chance to connect and network with other writers. So we hope you join us for that. Thank you for coming.